will give a very quick intro, and then we can go where you want to go. So this whole thing started, I mean, everybody knows the 5 principles here, but when I brought it into class and started teaching, I found one of the interesting problems was especially the crazy quilt principle. And my students would have all these questions and confusions about how to talk to people, right? So I would say, they would say, for example, if I'm going to build this effectually, like, how do I talk to like a potential customer? Or you're saying it's not really market research. So what am I talking to them about? And then they would say things like, how can I possibly go and talk to an investor without having a business plan or without having at least a pitch deck? And so this question came up over and over. And I would say, just go up to them and ask. And it turned out that students were not comfortable doing that. And this I saw in multiple classrooms, not only undergraduates, but MBA students were even less comfortable than undergraduates. Undergraduates, at least if you tell them to do something, if they're inspired enough by you, they will at least try it. With MBA students, you get pushback. And then I started finding this question arise even in practical practitioner settings where I'm talking to like small business owners. There were certain things that they were open to going out and asking, and there were certain things they were not. And so I started giving this particular argument to people, right? So when you're building a company causally, you make a pitch, right? You decide what you want to do based on your goals and the opportunity that you're envisioning. You decide what resources you need, and you also do some research to find out who has those resources. And then you go, make a pitch that will convince them to give you the resources. This seems like clean step-by-step process that everybody can learn and teach. Now, when you think about the effectual ask, it's like, okay, you're going to decide what you can do based on your means and affordable loss. Okay, you have taught me enough. I can at least learn that. But then you say, I have to talk to anybody and everybody who may be interested. And so right here, the confusion began. And then the idea was, if you're talking to multiple people and some of whom you don't even know who they are or what they have, how do you do this? So you have to have multiple ways of talking to people. So you have to have a variety of asks. And then you have to be open to reshaping your idea. So this was the problem in the classroom. And as I said, in multiple classrooms. And so the next thing I did was to start talking to students and asking them to populate this slide, which is, and different students were at different levels of understanding. And of course, a lot of people will start at the bird in hand level, which is just questions that you're asking. So this everybody had access to. Then they would start talking about, like, who do I ask, when, where, and how do I ask? And then slowly I started teaching them about an affordable loss pitch, right? To actually figure out what the other person's affordable loss is, ask them what they're willing to do for their affordable loss. So we started making progress on that a little bit. Then here is where we really got stuck, asking strangers. And then the idea was, how do I get other people to knock on your door? That got even more complex. And then a very experienced entrepreneur came to class, and basically she said that the most important thing you need to get to is, even when you're not in the room, right? Somebody else is asking on your behalf. Like, that's when you have really learned entrepreneurship. So this became kind of the way to start building the teaching materials for the class, like break it down step by step. On the research front, though, there was a different kind of pressure. There were two pressures. One pressure was, what is it that human beings can practice so that they become an expert entrepreneur? Because in the literature on expertise, there is this idea of deliberate practice, that there is something that you have to practice, and you practice something that you get feedback on, and then you push yourself to the next level. So there was an article from Robert Barron basically asking, like, what is it that these entrepreneurs practice in order to become an expert entrepreneur? from a practical side, the question came about the president of American Express Open. They had identified about 100,000 small business owners who were able to grow their business and who wanted to grow their business, and they wanted to ask this question: is there any way for people to accelerate their way? I mean, is it that they have to do 15 years and multiple ventures? Is that the only way to get to expertise, or is there something we can teach them? And so this is kind of the classic expertise curve, right? That you start as a novice, and as a novice, you're just simply doing a lot of different things. It's just churn. You do whatever you're reading something in Ink magazine, some friend is saying something, some entrepreneur comes to class and says something, you try everything, kind of a trial and error churn. And then slowly, as you start, if you actually do something about it, you start doing a little bit more like causal experimentation. Now certain things are working, certain things are not working. So you're trying to understand what works and what doesn't work. So you get into some experimentation strategies and you start learning about prediction and control a little bit. And then as you have more experience, you start developing like a clear understanding why something is working and under what circumstance it works, and why that same thing doesn't work under different circumstances. You actually start building judgment, right, at this point in time. And then eventually you get this mastery of all the different techniques that go into doing it well, and including things like where they work and how they work, and how you as a person, given what you are and the venture you are building, you can match that up to your judgment as well. And you can also expand your judgment to other ventures, those kinds of things. So this was the first study we did, and this is the first time I'm actually bringing this slide to anywhere in the public outside of Amex. So we had 250 small business owners across the country who participated in the study. This was an experience sampling study. They called in 5 minutes a day for 60 days in a row to tell us about the asks that they were making, the asks that they were trying to make, what was working, what was not working, why, if they are not able to make an ask that they think they should make, why were they not making it, and what happened, and how they responded, and all of these things. So the data is rich, but also, as you can imagine, it's also very messy data. So we broke it down and started looking. So this is like the basic things. But before they started the experience sampling study, we also did a survey where we asked questions about a lot of psychological variables, demographic variables, and we also had details of their past ask experience. So we had a list of asks that we gave them, and we asked them, have you ever made this kind of ask? And these were like more complex asks than just asking for money or some resources. There would be asks such as, you have to go and ask your supplier for extra time to pay your previous bill, but at the same time ask them a longer credit period for the next one because your business is growing. Or you have to ask your customer to introduce you to an investor. So things that were a little bit more complex than the normal just asking for resource or asking for advice or asking for feedback. So we actually had this measure that we developed. And you can see there is a distinct difference, right? Even though we didn't really have any, I think we had maybe one entrepreneur in the study that could count as an expert because she had started like 8 companies or something, but most of them were kind of in the middling range. But I had data from the expert entrepreneurs that I could bring to the table. So you can see, first of all, there is a huge difference so when you look at all the asks that were made, like 60, so the novices made only asks like 16% of the time. The 16% of all the asks that they were supposed to make, and the experts would make 42%. And one of the reasons was they made open asks, right? So they were asking in such a way that it's not just the number of asks, the way they were asking, the other person would come back and start talking to them. So we figured out a way to code all that, and we called this like the O2, like the oxygen score. And the oxygen is really the idea of how likely are you to make not just an ask, but an open ask, right? Uh, and then we also looked at, so I have some interesting information on psychological variables and stuff like that. And the particularly interesting one was optimism. So we have one paper currently under review that is looking at that in some detail, right? On the one hand, you have to have certain level of optimism for you to ask at all, but along the way, right, the more optimistic you are, the less likely you are to ask, because you believe that is going to succeed anyway, right? So you tend to go much more on a causal path. And then the percentage of asks that don't work out are not that is kind of a bad number. Most of the person asks don't work out, and then you get depressed. So the interaction between optimism and asking on the development to expertise is one of the interesting things that we have been working on and working out since then. And you all know that I have several other studies, in-depth interviews with Inc. 500 entrepreneurs. We also have a series of experiments we are running. In fact, I'm going to end my presentation with an ask from you, which is we are currently collecting some data, and this data is from the general public. But we want to compare the general public with entrepreneurs with experience. And so for those of you who can just simply, reach out to entrepreneurs, have them fill out the survey, I'm going to just give you access to the survey so you can collect data and send it back to us. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end today to ask, to talk a little bit more about this project and